on the show today. We haven't talked a ton about that massive deal that was made while we were away with the Knicks and the Timberwolves making a big-time trade. So we'll do a little jazz on the show. One day away from game day, from match day for RSL. They welcome in Minnesota coming up tomorrow night at 7:30 at America First Field, trying to hold on to a top 4 seed in order to host a home playoff match. So all the ladies with RSL on the show as well. The Utah Hockey Club is high speed ahead to their opener as the Blackhawks are in town coming up next week. And obviously one eye over there as excited for pro hockey to land on our market. Major League Baseball wildcard action. The Tigers lead the Astros 3-0, bottom of the 6th there. So fall means a lot of things, and it certainly means baseball playoffs, which I've always really enjoyed. All right, good guest list for you guys. On this Tuesday afternoon, we'll start things off with Joe Fortenbaugh. We'll talk a little college and pro football with Joe. He's going to stop by today. Richard Smith joins us coming up at 3 o'clock. The triumphant return of Smitty. He'll roll by today. Scott Mitchell, former Utah quarterback, one of the best to ever do it, is our guest in the 4 o'clock hour. Then the voice himself, who is now off the pressure that came with potentially a Utah undefeated season. The Bill Riley mullet watch is over. But let's see if I can corner. Maybe we'll make him grow a mustache if Utah wins against Arizona State. I don't know. We'll see. So Joe Fortenbaugh, Richard Smith, Scott Mitchell, Bill Riley, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, on this Tuesday, and that guy, Porter Larson, on a Tuesday afternoon. Tuesdays during the football season hit a little differently. At least we have Major League Baseball playoff action, little NBA basketball, Utah Hockey Club as well. How's your Tuesday afternoon?
Yeah, man. Tuesdays until mid-October. I'm just waiting until we get Maction on our Tuesday television screens.
Yeah, I've told you this before. Just do what I do and record Maction from years past, and then when there's no football, just watch it on your DVR.
Right. And I'm getting to that point, but luckily for me, my Mets are surviving and advancing, at least until today. Got the wild card matchups, as you mentioned, so a little nervous as we approach the first pitch of that one. But that's holding me over at this point until we get some football and of course, a bye week for the Utes, but plenty of other college football storylines to get to this week.
Little breaking news on a Tuesday. According to Ian Rappaport, Devontae Adams has requested a trade from the Raiders. And you kind of understand why. So little NFL news on a Tuesday afternoon. All right, our first guest today is Joe Fortenbaugh. So we'll get you ready for a busy weekend ahead in pro and college football with Joe. But before we catch up with Joe on a Tuesday, courtesy of our friends at Standard Restaurant Supply, it's your tailgate headquarters. Get everything you need to make your tailgate epic. Check them out at 3500 Southwest Temple and online at standardrestaurant.com. On a Tuesday afternoon, it's time now for your opening tip. So the University of Utah on the football side of things has a bye week this week. Then they're back in action coming up next week against Arizona State. Arizona State was off to a really good start to the year. And, they might be a little bit better than most people thought. We have not seen a line release, nor will we. That's going to be an 8:30 p.m. kick. We do have that down in Tempe, Arizona. And you're hoping on the Utah football side that they're able to do what Arizona just did, utilizing their bye week to make sure that they have, quote, a get-right game. Now, that was kind of the narrative from the Arizona side of things before last Saturday when the Wildcats rolled into Rice-Eccles Stadium and, quite frankly, just undressed the Utes. 23-10 was the final score. And prior to that, Arizona went to K-State, and they got stomped. And so a lot of people were saying on the Arizona side of things, let's utilize the bye week, let's get healthy a little bit, and let's make sure Saturday at Rice-Eccles Stadium was, quote, a get-right game. And that's what it was for the Wildcats. They looked fresh. They looked healthy. They looked rested. They got a couple of players back during the bye week. Fafita was awesome. He was able to evade a lot of pressure and make a lot of plays. And, of course, the conversation around here with the bye week is will this be enough to get Cameron Rising ready, not just for Arizona State, but for the rest of the season. So Dennis Dodd, friend of the show, joined us during Big 12 Media Days. He wrote a piece today for CBS, really kind of taking the University of Utah to task for the way they've handled the messaging. Because, of course, his status is week by week. And as I've said on the show, I'm going to operate off the assumption that it's Isaac until it's not. But this continues to be kind of the main topic, not just around here, but folks that, cover college football big picture style, like a guy like Dennis Dodd. Now, it's very important to be clear that this is not just a Coach Witt thing. Kalani Sitake right now is dealing with some injuries to his running back room, and he has taken a page out of his former boss's book by being very vague about the status of L.J. Martin and some others. It takes place all over the country. This is not just a Utah thing. It feels like around here it's been spun into just a Utah thing and just a Kyle Whittingham thing. It's not. And it really depends on your opinion of what actually, is at stake when you report injuries. Do you believe that it is a competitive advantage? I think Kyle does. I think he's made that very clear. And if your only job is to win football games, as I've talked about, and that's Coach Witt's job, you have to utilize every single piece of ammunition at your disposal to make sure your team is in the best spot possible. Now, there's a very legitimate debate as to whether or not it actually is a competitive advantage. As I referenced, I think yesterday, Jim Harbaugh has always scoffed at that notion that it is a competitive advantage, and he's always reported, even when he hasn't had to. He's talked openly about when he was in college. Obviously, he's in the pros now with the Chargers, and pro coaches have no choice but to report. But even when he didn't have to report, he kind of scoffed at the notion that this really is a competitive advantage. So ultimately, I'm just going to repeat a little bit what I said yesterday. I don't agree with the portion of the Utah fan base that wants to move on from Cameron. Dennis Dodd himself, in his piece today, quoted a bunch of different Ute fans that he's heard from about what their preferences are as far as what's next under center. One of them said, quote, "It's time to move on from an injury-prone starter. Yes, thank you for your heart and grit, but I believe at this point he's doing more harm than good. Cam went all fall getting QB1 reps, and now he stands on the sidelines watching again. For the second year in a row, Cam is the highest paid NIL player on the team, and there's not much return on that investment." And guys, I said it. Like, the unfortunate part of this whole thing is that money does change the way people feel about how you're performing at work. It just does. If you're a lawyer and it's pro bono, it's different if you're being paid millions of dollars to do your work. If you're a college athlete and you're a, quote, amateur, which was never really a thing, it was invented to distract everybody from the fact that the business was being built on the backs of employees they didn't pay. But for years, there was this kind of unspoken rule in broadcasting where you just don't crack on college kids. You just don't, because they're not paid for their endeavors. And essentially, they are unpaid employees because there are a lot of people getting rich off their backs. Now that's changed. And because that's changed, people are going to feel differently about the situation. I'll repeat what I said yesterday, and I'll continue to send people towards a couple of things. Number one, Chris Camerati's article from The Athletic, when he had access to Cam, when he had access to Cam's family. And for the first time, at least in my opinion, on the record, Cameron Rising spoke about the dark days and nights he had last year trying to get back from what was a horrific knee injury. This was not an ACL. This is not a sprain. He blew up his knee. And that's why when I was doing the math last year, because, we all heard the rhetoric, we all heard the propaganda, the walking line that ultimately talked about Cam potentially being back for Florida. I didn't buy that for a second, and I didn't have any information on it. You just do the math from when Cameron hurt himself last January, what that injury entails. That injury takes a year, oftentimes, sometimes more. Oftentimes, sometimes it never is the same. So I never thought that he was playing last year, and honestly, I continue to feel bad for him because the way they've handled the dissemination of information, the way they've handled the messaging, I guarantee Cam doesn't have 1 iota of a percent of how that goes down. This is not on him. And ultimately, he's hurt. He just is. And I know injuries suck, and I know a lot of people are frustrated about the way it's been handled. And yes, according to what Dennis Dodd wrote and some of the feedback he received from Utah fans, there is a portion of the fan base that's ready to move on altogether. I think that's a slippery slope because I still believe, as we saw on Saturday, Isaac's got a long way to go. If Utah wants to compete and win the Big 12 this year, I still believe Cameron has to be under center for the majority of the season. They're going to have to get more from Isaac for sure. Whether he starts against Arizona State, there will be reps that Isaac will take the rest of the way because the data is in and Cam has a tough time staying healthy. And I just have never bought the premise that you can retrain somebody like Cameron Rising, who is a competitor who wants to go out and give it his all, to play differently in order to stay healthy. because essentially you cut his legs out from underneath him. One of the things that makes Cam great is that he wants to compete. He wants to play. He's not afraid to take a hit. He'll take off and gain yards if he needs to. And yes, it would be great for everybody if he played a little bit safer, discretion, the better form of valor in order to stay healthy. But guys, the data's in, okay? We don't need to see anymore. So for Utah to win the Big 12, yes, I believe they need Cam under center, but I do believe Isaac needs more reps with the ones because he has to stay ready so he doesn't have to get ready, as the kids would say, when the inevitability, and that is the term I will use, comes back down into play where they need him under center again because Cam's not ready or Cam's not healthy. But it's an interesting read. If you want to check out CBSSports.com, Dennis Dodd, the latest to kind of take Utah to task about the way they've handled this and ultimately how much negative attention is falling on the shoulders of Cam because of the way they've decided to handle it. And it's not Cam's fault. I continue to stay on that. My heart goes out to him, and I hope that he gets back soon. And hopefully with the bye week and then a game against a good but pretty beatable team in Arizona State, hopefully Utah can do to Arizona State what Arizona did to Utah after a bye week and have a, quote, get-right game coming up down in Tempe on the 5th, 6 o'clock. Excuse me, that's the wrong kickoff. Let me get you the right kickoff. Coming up in Tempe on the 11th. It's a bye week, 8:30. It's a late kick on ESPN against Arizona State. No line has been released on that game just yet. All right, before we catch a break, I want to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players, for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts selected player projections up to 25% to provide even more value in your lineups. It's the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which players aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. So download the Prize Picks app today and use that promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, our good friends, make sure to run your game all season long. All right, Joe Fortenbaugh is our guest coming up next on a Tuesday right here on ESPN 700. Smith today. Smitty stops by as the Utah Jazz open up training camp this week. And we'll also discuss that massive deal that went down between the T-Wolves and the New York Knickerbockers. Scott Mitchell, former Utah quarterback, and then Bill Riley, the voice of the Utes, too, for more college football. But joining me now on a Tuesday, excited for this. I've never had a chance to interview Joe Fortenbaugh from ESPN. Joe, happy Tuesday, sir. How are you?
Happy Tuesday. I'm doing well. More importantly, thanks so much for the invite to come on the show today. I greatly appreciate it. Apologies. I started losing my voice late last week, and I never got an opportunity to bring it all the way back. It seemed like I had something going on every single day between a show or a taping or a benefit or an event, something we were doing. And I'm just trying to get this thing back into shape. But I think I got enough for you here. I'm trying to hit the high octaves for you.
No worries, man. I appreciate the time. So I was just curious about your path, right? Because obviously you're on ESPN Bet. We see you on TV. I have ESPN on up in the studio every day. We're the affiliate out here in Salt Lake City. You've got the Carlin versus Joe Monday through Friday. But were you always one to lean into odds and lines and betting, or what was your career path that led you to where you're at now, Joe?
Undergrad at Penn State, law school in San Diego, and I originally wanted to be an NFL agent. I wanted to work in sports in some capacity, so that's the reason I went to law school. It turns out the agent I interned for when I was in law school started a website in 2008 called National Football Post. And I got a job managing the website, writing about fantasy football, kind of doing all the day-to-day stuff. There was an agent, there was a former NFL general manager, former salary cap guy, former player, presenting all that stuff from an inside perspective. And a couple years into it, I decided I wanted to write about sports betting. I had been betting since I was younger. I'm playing parlay sheets and all that nonsense. And I just figured, Chad Millman was like the only guy doing it at ESPN. So I started writing about it a little bit, and then I just decided to pick up and move to Las Vegas. I was living back in Pennsylvania at the time. I had a $2,000 maxed out credit card. I had like no money to my name. But I figured, let's go out there. Let's do this right. Let's meet all the bookmakers. Let's meet all the professional bettors. Let's learn how the industry works. Let's write about it. Let's figure it out. And while I was doing that, I ended up landing a job, very circuitous route, where I got a morning show offer to move to San Francisco and do radio up there. But while I was up there, I continued podcasting and writing about sports betting. And then boom, in 2018, when PASPA got repealed, networks started looking for people. And I just kind of held out for ESPN. I was one of the only guys out there that had been doing this for a while. So I ended up having some opportunities, and I ran with it from there. So I'm very fortunate, caught a lot of breaks along the way. There's a lot of people to thank at every turn that were there to help me.
Fair enough. Well, that's good stuff. Let's do a little NFL today, and I wonder what sort of trends. There's a piece up today by Stephen Holder about the noticeable decline in passing yards. What sort of trends have you noticed early on in pro football, just through a few weeks, 4 weeks now, that maybe have caught you off guard?
That's the big one, the too high safety, right? Defenses are playing a lot more cover two, and as a result, it's been limiting the big plays on offense, suppressing scoring a little bit, limiting some player props in terms of quarterback passing yards, things of that nature, right? And then on top of it, we didn't see a lot of key players playing in the preseason, so they came into the year rusty. I think all that's going to regress. The scoring will pick up here, in my opinion, as we move forward. But that's one of the angles you can look for. Running backs have been having a lot of success this season going against the too high, because that's how you counter it. You just run the ball. They're light in the box, so that's what you take advantage of. If you're looking for a couple key trends, two that I've been monitoring that date back to last season that have been really successful, betting against the Kansas City Chiefs in the first half, betting on the Kansas City Chiefs in the second half. They have been a really slow starting team going back to early last season, and it was on full display in the Super Bowl and most of their playoff games. Like, they would not cover the spread in the first half, and we've been seeing it all year, and then they come back and they win these games. Baltimore is the opposite. Baltimore is a team you bet on in the first half, and then you bet against them in the second half. And I know you just asked for NFL, but I throw this on top because it's a college angle, but it leads right into it. Tennessee head coach Josh Heupel, he coached at Central Florida for 3 years. Now he's in his fourth year at Tennessee. In the first half, he's hitting 70% against the spread. And if he's on the road, he's hitting 76% of the time on the first half line. It's incredible how good his team is. Guess what? They're coming off the bye. They're on the road at Arkansas this week. They're like a 7-point favorite in the first half. absolute autoplay for me.
So we're out here now in Big 12 country, formerly known as Pac-12 country, with the University of Utah. BYU's been in the Big 12 now for a couple of years. You know, for me, I have a hard time deciphering what's real and what isn't in this conference. Is it safe to say that the Big 12 has provided the most chaos so far in college football, or would you go in a different direction?
Yeah, no, I would say that, and I would also tell you that that's exactly what the professional bettors were predicting before the season started. Because there were three teams you could look at and say, all right, these are the three teams that have a good chance of winning this conference, and the odds kind of reflected these three teams as being close to on par with one another: Utah, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State. But as great as that Utah win over Oklahoma State 2 weeks ago was, the loss against Arizona negates all that, right? It brings everyone right back into play. And Kansas State's had their struggles. Okie State's had their struggles. We see what's going on with some of the other teams. So it's been a very intriguing conference throughout the course of the year. So to answer your question in a long, roundabout way, yeah, it's the wild card conference. There's still a lot to like. I would love to get a straight answer on what's going on with Cam Rising, because I still think it's Utah. I still think Utah is a good bet to make the playoff. But at some point, we got to figure out what's going on with the starting quarterback, because there's a couple key games down the stretch that they're going to need him for.
So it's funny you mentioned that, because I wanted to kind of kick the tires with you on the way that the University of Utah has elected to handle the situation. And ultimately, Kyle Whittingham, their head coach, doesn't give a rip about whether or not fans are mad if the quarterback is not playing or if he is playing, nor does he give a rip what the media has to say about it. But I wonder, Joe, and this is in your wheelhouse in a way that it's just not in mine. I mean, the modern day situation in all sports really is that betting has kind of changed the game. And college football, in my opinion, is not as front-facing and obvious about how they're in bed with the gambling companies. But the NFL certainly is. There are QR codes in the NBA games. You get the deal. Do you think now that the reality is sports of all kinds, since they've embraced the gambling and the apps and the companies, that at some point just every school is going to have to, it'll be a mandate that you have to report injuries? They do it in the SEC, but they don't do it in the Big 12. Do you think we're high speed ahead to a mandate for every member institution that plays football?
It's such an interesting question because it has such a complicated answer. In regards to Utah, if they're not being forced to give you that information, I would do the same thing Whittingham's doing, I'd be doing the exact same thing. I would be playing coy. He did this last year with the knee injury to start the season, and he's been doing it with the hand. So why give your opponent any information you don't have to give them? Now, to the future, the direction this is going, it kind of still is the Wild West with NIL and the way the transfer portal works. And we all know what happened at UNLV with their quarterback. It's only a matter of time before contracts come into play. And then we find ourselves with a situation in which there's probably a players union, and we start to get to a point where we're just making another professional football league, right? Like there's going to be the NFL, and then there's going to be a handful of college teams that make up this new professional league, and then the ones that can't keep up financially are probably going to play a more traditional version of college football, and that'll be what we're looking at. And when that happens, yes, we're going to need injury reports just like we get in the NFL. And there will be some gamesmanship, I'm sure. The Niners did that with Christian McCaffrey to start the season. But ultimately, we won't have the situations like we're having at the University of Utah, which, again, to be fair, if I'm in his shoes, I'm doing that exact same thing. I don't see any reason to give out information if you're not being forced to.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And that's why, I know fans are frustrated. I know the community's frustrated because we get a game time decision week in and week out, and then the game comes and he doesn't play. And certainly it does remind folks of a year ago as far as the same situation happening week in and week out. I do feel bad for the player. I feel bad for Cam because he's just hurt. And then once he's healthy, I think he's going to play. But let me follow up with a question about Utah. You already referenced that you feel like they should be the favorite to make the playoff and win the Big 12 if Cam's under center. What if he's not? What does that do to your opinion? What if it is this 18-year-old true freshman Isaac Wilson the rest of the season? Do you still think Utah can get it done in the Big 12?
No, I got to knock him out. And to be honest with you, that kills me because I have a massive bet on Utah winning that conference and going over 9.5 wins this season. It was one of my favorite bets this year. So outside of the Great Salt Lake region, I'm probably watching as much Utah football as anybody out there. And I think Wilson has made some big-time throws. He's got the arm strength. He's got that arm talent you talk about at the next level. I've watched him make some plays. The second half of the Utah State game, he did what he needed to do to win that game and bring him back. But the thing is, they are way too inconsistent on offense. Like, they've got no pop. They have got to be able to hang points quickly in certain spots. Arizona's not good. I'm sorry, but they're not a good team. They got rolled up a couple weeks before that game, and that was a great spot for them because they're coming off the bye, and Utah was off that war at Oklahoma State. But there's no excuse for losing that game and playing to that extent. So Wilson down the road, maybe next season's got some potential, but late in the season, you've got the UCF game, which I know doesn't look all that daunting now because they just lost to Colorado. You got Colorado on the schedule. There's at least one other one that I'm blanking on right now that's going to be somewhat challenging. And while it's not overwhelming, the fact that you beat Oklahoma State, which was the only spot all season where you were going to be an underdog, and then you blew it the next week with Arizona, you just kind of flushed all that goodwill. Like, everything was set to just survive Arizona and then kind of reset with the bye week and everything. So, no, if you told me right now it's going to be Wilson the rest of the way, I tell you they're losing at least one more game.
So the one game you may be blanking, and I won't hold you accountable for this, is probably the BYU game here in Salt Lake.
Yes. Great call.
No,
BYU's been very good this season.
Sure, and that's where I want to follow up because, Kalani Sitake, their head coach, used to be the D coordinator up here. I used to do a coaches show with him weekly, so he's a friend. I don't hide the fact that I want him to succeed so he can keep his job. Joins the show. So does their offensive coordinator. We're the home of the Utes, and, of course, we want Utah to do well, but it's better around here when both of these teams are good. So my question, Joe, as of today, how good do you think BYU is?
BYU's been very good, and I think that's the thing. They've caught some people by surprise. They were not projected to be one of those teams that was going to make a lot of noise in the conference this season, right? Like, there was some upside there, but anywhere you went, at least from the stuff I read from people who are professional gamblers and handicap this, they were kind of seen as like an on-the-fringe sort of team that might make a little noise, but we weren't going to take them too seriously. But again, that leads into the whole wild card factor of the Big 12 Conference in general, and they've proven to take advantage of the opportunities that are out there with the Big Three stumbling early and often throughout the course of the season. So given what I've seen with the flaws in the other teams, so much of this comes down to key scheduling spots, like what just happened to Utah, the idea of playing this war, and then the next week you got to play someone coming off a bye week. That stuff is so important in college football, and I don't think people realize that enough. The third road game in 4 weeks, or the matchup this weekend, for example, Alabama, they're off a huge win, and they're laying 24 against Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt is a great bet this weekend. I think this is a really flat spot for Alabama. I think they end up winning, yes, but I take Vanderbilt plus the points. This is their Super Bowl, man. So back to your original question, yes, I think BYU is what we'd call live to win this conference because so far what we've seen is that it's wide open and no one has seized upon the opportunities that have been given them through the first month plus of the season.
Deion Sanders, of course, is a lightning rod for attention and either a polarizing figure, depending on what you believe about him. I appreciate the attention he brings to this region and this conference, but I don't think a lot of people thought we'd be sitting here, Joe, talking about BYU, Texas Tech, and then Colorado atop the conference 2-0, 4-1 through 5. Where are you at as of today on Colorado's chances of maybe even getting this thing done and winning? Are they among the contenders to win the Big 12?
You see, I might be the worst possible person to ask about this because I came into the season and I was the same way last year. I saw them as a very overvalued football team because you got a lot of public money backing them up. You got a lot of hype, but the team isn't good enough to match that hype. So there's opportunities to bet against them. And last year I looked like a fool early in the season because they kept winning, but then eventually I had my day and they stumbled down the stretch and there were a lot of profitable opportunities there, specifically that Oregon game. That spread early in the year was way too short. So now here we are again. I had them dead to rights in that UCF game. It was their third road game in 4 weeks. They were off a huge win. UCF was off the bye. They were going to play in the humidity in Florida. That was earmarked for a UCF win. They were 2 touchdown favorites, and they got their rear ends kicked in that game. Absolutely kicked. That, I think, was the best win I've seen from Deion Sanders in the last couple seasons he's been at Colorado. Very impressive to overcome the spot like that and to put a whooping on a team to that extent. So I probably will continue to doubt them. I will consider them overrated because I worry about the offensive line and I worry about the defense outside of Travis Hunter, but they've been proving me wrong left and right. So mark my words on this one. If we need to circle back in a few weeks and you need to shove it right in my face, you go ahead and do so. I'm going down with that ship, but he's been proving me wrong so far this season.
Back to the NFL, which team, maybe it's just the Vikings because they're undefeated, which team has been the most difficult to kind of nail down as far as is this real through 4 weeks, which has been the most, and you can throw out a couple of names if you want, Joe, but the most difficult NFL team to try to understand what's happening right now?
I think it's the teams that zigzag. That's the thing. Like the Vikings are a pleasant surprise, but I think we learned that they're good, right? Like maybe they're not great, but look at them. They're 4-0. They've got a great defense. Quarterback's number one in the NFL in quarterback rating, and they've beaten the Niners, the Texans, and the Packers, and that was a road game. Like those are three teams that people were picking them to go to the conference championship and win the Super Bowl this year, right? Like that is the most impressive strength of schedule in the NFL so far. So they deserve all the respect in the world. It's no longer a question of whether or not they're good. It's just like, are they great? The teams that are kind of like head scratchers trying to figure them out, the Saints, the Falcons, right? The Bucks, almost everybody in the NFC South outside of Carolina, because they've shown some promise, but they've also stumbled all over themselves. I think a team like Pittsburgh might be a little bit overvalued because they're winning all these one-score games. I think Kansas City is definitely overvalued. They're 4-0 with 4 one-score wins. Like every opportunity has been there for the opposition to beat them. I don't think people realize how close Kansas City is to being 0-4, but that's what great teams do. They find ways to win ugly games. So those are the teams that kind of get me, like these teams that might be 2-2 right now, where we've seen them play really well in some games and really sloppy in others. It's hard to get a gauge.
So opening the season, as you know, Vegas was kind of telling us that if you're going to lay a bet on the Super Bowl, you should look to Kansas City or San Francisco. And then there was a big gap between those two. And then you got into like the Baltimores and the Buffaloes. Through 4 weeks, what do the numbers say about the best teams in pro football right now?
You know, Kansas City's still sitting at the top naturally. They're undefeated. And the thing is, it's not so much that they're undefeated. It's that no one else has made a great case. Like, who is there? There was Buffalo, but they were 3-0 against 3 bad teams, and then they went out there and they got their butts kicked by a good team. So how good are they? Speaking of Baltimore, all right, they're 2-2, but they've had some sloppy spots this season, and we all know about their struggles in the playoffs. The Jets' coaching is definitely a problem. It's going to prevent them from being great. They can be good, but Robert Saleh is going to prevent them from being great. Houston, I think, has got vulnerabilities, and nobody's challenging in the West with all those injuries to the Chargers right now. So ultimately, the AFC is the Chiefs. It's hard to find someone else to say, yeah, I really believe in insert team here like the Steelers, because I think quarterback play is going to be a struggle there. Eagles, Cowboys down in the NFC, you got to give a lot of respect to Minnesota, okay? You got to respect Detroit. They should be undefeated. That one loss, they gave that game away. They were 1 for 7 in the red zone. They outgained Tampa Bay by 250 total yards. Detroit's probably the best team, in my opinion, in the NFC, and Minnesota's right there with them. Green Bay's going to be formidable. And then I want to say Seattle. I really want to believe in Seattle, but they feel like they're 1 year away from being a serious threat. That was a good opportunity for them last night, and they showed some moxie, but they got some problems. That was their first big test, and they got crushed defensively.
All right, Joe, before I set you loose, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked you about the NFL. I'm going to ask you about, I'm going to ask you about college football. We already talked Big 12, but big picture, juxtaposed to how everything started, what do the numbers say about the teams that are legitimately going to be in it at the end to win the whole thing?
Well, I mean, Bama is just getting all the love in the world right now because of that win. And how could you not give it to them? I would say don't downgrade Georgia by too much because they went on the road. They showed a lot of guts coming all the way back in that game to take the lead late. I think they still very much deserve everybody's respect. Ole Miss showed us their true colors. Anytime you put pressure on Lane Kiffin and say it's going to be his year, anytime you put expectations on him, they're going to flop. That's as right as rain in the springtime in the Northeast. Like, you know that's coming. So I would look around. I would say I can't wait to see Ohio State get tested because we haven't talked about them at all this season. I think Tennessee deserves a lot of respect because everyone focuses on the offense and the big play production. But on top of that, defensively, they find a way to get some stops. And I know NC State isn't great, but they throttle them. And I know Oklahoma isn't great, but they've throttled them. They've got some reputable teams on their schedule, and they've absolutely kicked everybody's butt. So that's the team I'm kind of watching right now. They got 2 big tests the rest of the way, one of which is going to be Alabama. Very interested to see how the rest of the season goes for Tennessee.
Joe, I appreciate the time, man. Keep up the great work. We'd love to do it again soon, okay?
It was my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
All right, Joe Fortenbaugh. He is on ESPN, the ESPN Bet Live show on ESPN2, has a radio show called Carlin vs. Joe, Monday through Friday, noon to 3. That's Eastern time on ESPN Radio. Get him on Twitter, just his name, @Joe Fortenbaugh is where you find him. All right, before we catch a break, I want to tell you about my friends at Clearwater Distilling. Clearwater Distilling is the only distillery in Utah County open on Sundays. Great spirits. They've got a tasting room and the nicest crew around. Limited release Wednesday whiskey, batch number 2, mix of their bourbon and rye whiskeys. They've got the Scandalous, the Renee, or their vodka, which is now in most state liquor stores. The football season has kicked off, and Clearwater is also the official spirits provider for our ESPN tailgate. We have it every home game. Do yourself a favor, check out the tailgate and schedule a tour and tastings in their Victorian tasting room. It makes a great date night, a fun activity anytime. Authentic, vintage, prohibition, prescriptions, and decor. Try their Scandalous, and no sugar, no additives. Great tasting grown-up version of cinnamon whiskey. They've got ultra-premium spirits, many with a unique twist. The Renee is awesome. Try their Armagnac, their Josephine, their Lorenz. You can buy their spirits in state liquor stores, online, or take a trip to their beautiful distillery. Grab some booze, some local cigars, and immerse yourself in the Clearwater Distilling culture. More information can be found at clearwaterdistilling.com. All right, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. Smitty live in studio coming up next right here on ESPN 700. All right, Scott Mitchell is going to roll by coming up in about an hour from right now. And then Bill Riley will join us following Scott's hit. Bill's going to join us at 4:30. So back to some college football. Some good stuff with Joe Fortenbaugh today, talking a little pro football, a little college football. But it's been too long. We have our guy back in studio, 40 years with the Jazz front office, and now just living the dream. Richard Smith. Smitty, happy Tuesday, buddy. How we doing?
It is a dream too.
Spence. Oh, I know.
And look where I've gotten the station in life that I've gotten to right now, where I'm the opening act for the big hitters like Scott Mitchell and Bill Riley. How about that?
Yeah, I mean,
who would have thunk it?
This is the final. You caught the final branch, Smitty. We're your final branch. We're propping you up. But
That's it.
We appreciate your time, man. How you been? What's been going on with you?
Hey, we've been on this worldwide tour that my wife and I have been on all year, and in and out of town. Every month we have something going on, and we were back east and got my final 2 baseball parks in, and so I've got all 30 ballparks under my belt.
Amazing.
And we did that and went to the U.S. Open, and then went down a couple weeks ago down to Phoenix to see Green Day in concert and a couple baseball games. And now next week, because of our good friend Wesley Ruff, and thanks again to Wes, he got me in with Gina down at the PGA tournament at Black Desert. So we're going to volunteer and work down there next week and have some fun seeing the course for the first time. I know guys like you have been down there mastering the course.
Well, it's for VIPs.
Playing. Yeah, I got it, man.
Only at this point.
And that's why I'll be down there working and probably emptying the garbage cans or doing something. But
like I said, living the dream. It sounds
Hey,
like the
that's
dream to
me.
me, Smitty. All right, before we do a little jazz, I wanted to, we said goodbye to the Bees here in the capital city last week, and I wasn't able to get down there last weekend. I have been to a couple of games this year. Wanted to make sure I got to a couple before they moved. And you were there, and our guy Frank was there. I wonder what that was like. Frank has been such a fixture at that ballpark, and you have too. And after 30 years, they're heading down south to Daybreak. And I'm a fan of the Millers, obviously, with what Gale, Larry before Gale, and then both of them. Then Gale as the lone steward after Larry's passing, and I believe in their plan. I've had Steve Starks in the studio, and if the end game here is Major League Baseball, which we all hope it is, I understand it. I live in Salt Lake, so it's a little bit of a bummer for me, and excited for our friends in Daybreaks to experience it. But what was it like to be there for the final time with Frank?
Yeah, it was interesting. It was very emotional, just from the standpoint that while you're there, and at the end of the game, they let everybody come down and like run the bases or kind of just experience being on the field for a moment, and they usually do that with young kids after weekend games or run the bases, but they just let everybody come down, and there were older folks down there with their canes and just walking, from home to first or whatever, just to be on the field one last time. And it was quite emotional. Think about it, Spence, and Andy Larson did a great piece on this prior to it with the Salt Lake Tribune that baseball's been played on the corner of West Temple and 13th South for almost 100 years, and now it's going away. I'm in the same boat with you. I get it. Hey, look, we're doing this with the Bees, and the week later, the Oakland A's at the major league level are doing it, in Oakland, and they're leaving. And, and that's just, that's happened over the course of time and in pro sports, and teams leave and so forth. But, they're not leaving the market, obviously leaving for a different venue. But one of the misnomers I want to throw out there just to correct for people who think that was the closing of the ballpark and that baseball is done there. Actually, next spring, Utah baseball will still be playing one more year at Smith's Ballpark, as their ballpark being built up at the university campus is being finished. So there'll actually be some baseball played there next spring as a last hurrah, if you will, for people who want to go down there and see it one more time. But it was emotional. They had a great Phil Collins song playing over the speakers at the end of the game, about going home and stuff, and it got a little tearful as you were walking out and going, I guess this is it. This is the end of it.
Certainly, Frank can speak for himself, as we all know. and I'll ask him this next time I have the opportunity. But I wonder if you could shed some light on what it was like for him. Seventh inning stretch, that's his deal, man. So what do you think it was like for Frank this week?
No, and I'll tell you what, he was in great form. He not only did the seventh inning stretch and take me out to the ball game, but he added just a little 10-second note at the end of it about, we're gonna miss you, old ballpark, and we love you, and God bless everybody, that's been coming here all these years, or something to that effect. And it was very heartfelt. And I know, as only Frank can do, he spoke from the heart and right off the top, and it was a nice conclusion, to it.
Help me remember Ebbets Field, Brooklyn Dodgers.
Yes.
Right? I mean, maybe one of, if not the most famous baseball teams to get out of town.
Yeah.
Frank was a fan, right? And so he watched the Brooklyn Dodgers become the Los Angeles Dodgers.
He saw them move from Brooklyn after the 57 season. And most people forget, or if you're not a real baseball fan, maybe not aware that both New York City in its heyday in the 40s and 50s, when all the teams were competitive, the Brooklyn Dodgers, the New York Yankees, of course, in the Bronx, and then the New York Giants. They were over in the Polo Grounds, which from a physical standpoint, you could walk from one to the other. They were only like 3 miles apart, but three big-time major league teams. And after the 57 season, the Dodgers leave Brooklyn to go to L.A., and the Giants leave the Polo Grounds and go to San Francisco. And it was actually a time when both the owners got together, the Dodgers and the Giants, and said, hey, we're going to move. Yeah, you're going to move because we're not going to move unless you're moving. Yeah, we'll do this together. We'll do it at the same time, so we'll be natural rivals on the West Coast, which, just transferred the rivalry from the East Coast to the West Coast. But there was a moment in time, Spence, during all that, where the two owners were trying to negotiate. Now, where do you want to go? Yeah, well, we were thinking about LA. Well, I don't know. We kind of like that too. What do you think about? And they actually just kind of sat in a room one night and just hashed it out and said, well, we'll go to San Francisco. Okay, yeah, that'll be okay. Are you sure? Because we're going to go to LA. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. And so and it was easy as that. But both of them made the move with the idea that we have to get more revenue from where we are now. And not only was it attendance, but it was also in concessions. It was also parking, because if you knew anything about Brooklyn and the Polo Grounds, there was no parking around those venues, and so it was all hit and miss, and for the fans and all that. So they both moved west and both built ballparks where they owned the parking around the structure, around the facility. So, and to this day, it's still the same, obviously, in L.A., at Chavez Ravine. You go to a Dodger game, you have to park in the Dodgers parking lot because there's nowhere else to go. Now, there's some people who park down the street like 2 miles away, and they make the half-hour walk or whatever it is. But realistically, they built it, and they surrounded the ballpark with a 360-degree parking lot. So you go to a Dodger game, you have to pay them to park, and of course they own the concession, so they got all this money, and that's how they built up their farm system in the 60s and 70s, and became very competitive, and obviously still are today. And the Giants did the same thing when they originally moved, west and got Candlestick Park.
Yeah, the Cleveland Browns, the Baltimore Ravens stuff, like communities lose their teams all the time. One more thing on this, though, because I found myself a little, I guess, sympathetic to the folks in Oakland, because now they've lost the Warriors, they've lost the Raiders, and they've lost the A's. Now, as you just outlined, the motivation behind all these moves, it's one thing only. The golden rule is the man with the gold makes the rules, and folks trying to, generate more revenue and create more revenue streams, parking and such. And the Bay Area, I guess, has provided that for the Warriors in a way that Oakland, I guess, couldn't hang on to the Raiders. And now they've lost their baseball team. What do you make of when a community like that? I mean, it's one thing for Salt Lake to lose our minor league baseball team to daybreak. If you want to go see the Bees, you just have to drive another 20, 30 minutes.
Right.
It's a whole nother thing when a community over the past, 6, 7, 8 years has lost a basketball team that won 4 titles when they were there, a football team that won 2 titles while they were there, and a baseball team who at one point was thought to be the darling of Major League Baseball. They never got over they won back in the day, but like the Billy Bean Moneyball stuff, some great Oakland A's memories. Certainly, I'm old enough to remember the Bash Brothers, Canseco and McGuire. So 3 community-changing assets gone.
Yep.
What do you make of that, Smitty?
And for people who aren't really familiar with it in the Oakland area, those 2 venues are literally right next door to each other.
As it should be.
Right off the freeway, the 880, and they share the huge parking lot area. And to have that whole complex now is literally just sitting there. I don't know what the plans are by Oakland or Alameda County that runs those facilities, but it's really a shame. It's really now literally a ghost town. You drive by them, and there's nothing going on. Everything is shifted, whether it was with the Warriors, over to the San Francisco side, and they're right down the street from where the Giants are now, and so everything's kind of centered in San Francisco, and of course the Raiders moved to Vegas, and now supposedly the A's are going to eventually be in Vegas at some point, but it's tough. Look, the Raiders had the fan base. They just wanted a new setup and new revenue streams that Oakland couldn't provide. The A's dwindling attendance in the last 10, 15 years, wanted to get a new ballpark like the Giants had, couldn't get it, and the taxpayers there kept voting it down. And so and rightfully so. Why should they pay money for somebody else's business? Larry Miller always took that stance. Why would I ask the taxpayers for money when it's my business? So the A's are now going to go to Sacramento for a few years and hopefully get eventually to Vegas. But that's going to be another interesting thing, the whole Vegas A's thing, if you look into it, because they're tearing down the Tropicana. When I was there a few months ago, it is coming down. It's a big construction site, and yet there are several engineers who have written, independent people have written reports about that footprint in Vegas on that corner across from MGM Grand, and saying you cannot put a major league ballpark on that footprint and make it work in terms of the logistics and what you really need engineering wise. Not to say what it would impact, obviously, with traffic and parking and all the things. But that part of Vegas in the south end of the Strip is like that anyway. It's a big mess and a zoo, and but everybody goes anyway, right? Everybody's going to the Raiders games. People flock in to see the WNBA, the Aces play. T-Mobile is always packed whenever they have college games at T-Mobile. They've figured it out at UNLV at Thomas and Mack, so they'll figure something out. But it's going to be interesting. It's not this slam dunk deal. I think that a lot of people are assuming the A's are automatically going to that site. That's going to be an interesting thing to watch.
Last thing in this space, then we'll move on. And Commissioner Silver gave his annual, State of the Union, whatever you call it, prior to the start of training camps in the NBA. And he said, there's no imminent plans to expand, but eventually they will. And the talent's there. Certainly in pro basketball, when you look at a lot of the players that are out of the league that seem to be still somewhat young and really good, I would imagine, there was an argument at a time, at one time, that expansion would dilute the talent. I don't know that I'm there with it anymore. When it does happen, because I'm also old enough to remember commissioners, Pete Rozelle, David Stern, Bart Giamatti, like older commissioners that are no longer there, talking about how they would never touch Vegas because of the gambling, the nightlife, or whatever it is. And now everything has changed because all these sports are in bed with the gambling companies. And so now it feels like Vegas, Super Bowl, Final Four, whatever it is. When the NBA expands, do you think it is Vegas? Do you think it's Seattle? What do you think that looks like?
Yeah, that's what I would think, Spencer. The logical places are Seattle and Las Vegas, as the current economy dictates. St. Louis may try and get in the mix. Louisville may try and get in the mix. Vancouver. Or even
that would be awesome.
Montreal.
I'd be behind Vancouver. I was bummed that we lost that city.
Yeah, and they'll all be in the mix. Or have groups that'll make a pitch anyway. But it just seems like the big dogs in the fight at the moment would be those in Seattle and the people who want to get it in Vegas, because that just seems to to be where everybody is flowing, and the NBA has a relationship with Las Vegas for the last 20 years with the Summer League, and until last year, we're also holding the G League Showcase there in December every year, and the league would have meetings there, and every team would be there. So those seem like the logical places that they would go to next.
So before maybe we'll just do some jazz on our next segment, because I did want to kick the tires with you on some news that came down today. Gonzaga is going to join the Pac-12. And, Mark Few's a guy who I know that you know, and he's probably had opportunities to take jobs in other places over the course of his career because he's been so good up there. But from a college basketball standpoint, as far as how much it moves the needle, I just wanted to get your take on what Mark has built up there, because Gonzaga is joining a conference because of the basketball program, right? Which is a rarity in today's day and age of college athletics. The only other school I can think of that would be able to do something like this is UConn, right? Because the football program is, not what the basketball program is.
Yeah.
But what do you make of what Mark has built up at Gonzaga, where they can actually get a conference invite because of their basketball prowess only?
Yeah, well, it's a tremendous a feather in their cap that they've had that kind of a program for over 20 years now, 25 years and counting. They don't have football at Gonzaga, so they rely heavily on men's basketball for whether it's revenue streams or whether it's increased enrollment or applications for admission and that kind of thing. What Mark Few will do, that would be interesting, because I don't know, if and this is just me, I don't know anything about it at all. But when you're making a move like that, are you still going to be the big dog, or as you would say, the big fish in the little pond, as they've been for so long in the West Coast Conference, right? St. Mary's has fought them somewhat, BYU somewhat when they were in it, but they were always the top dog. And now, if you're not going to do that, and now with NIL stuff and the transfer portal, what is going to be your attraction to those players to keep them, and what is going to be your base from a financial standpoint to be able to stay where you are in those circles? There've been more than a few coaches, Spence, just in the last couple of years that I've known, who have said, "Hey, I can't deal with it. It's a whole different deal. I'm out of here," and have just retired and left the game. Whether it was Randy Ray up at Weber State, or whether it was Jay at Villanova. Mike Krzyzewski, of course, is a little bit older, so probably a ripe time for him to retire anyway. But a lot of prominent guys in the last couple of years have said, I don't think I can deal with this stuff. And so Gonzaga moving into that kind of conference will be interesting to see just how Mark Few deals with that on a personal and professional level going forward.
All right. Some sad news that surfaced this week, and I had a chance on a few occasions to meet Dikembe Mutombo. He was at Patrick Ewing's retirement at the Garden. And, Jazz fans remember great battles with Mark and Carl, back when Dikembe was in Denver. When he was in Atlanta, the Knicks and the Hawks had a little thing going back and forth. And, we could talk about his game, certainly second all-time in blocks, one of the best rebounding block shot bigs of that era. But it seems like most of the conversation this week, Smitty, has been about who he was when he wasn't playing as an ambassador. And you are uniquely qualified to talk about this. You've done some stuff, Basketball Without Borders, down in Africa, his home country, Republic of Congo. What would you tell our listeners about your knowledge of Dikembe as he passed away this week at the age of 58?
Yeah, what sad news to get, that he died of brain cancer, and what an awful thing to have to deal with, and at such a young age. He was a very impactful player on the court. He was very meaningful to the teams that he played for in terms of his personality, in terms of his total approach to the profession. He was really a great locker room guy that rallied people around him, but even more so off the court, both for his home country, both for the continent of Africa, both as an ambassador, for the NBA. He was the first official NBA ambassador, international ambassador, and was employed by the NBA for many, many years to go around the world and preach the game of basketball and to represent the NBA at the highest levels. And he was a guy who could get it done. He had that personality. He also had a certain level of humbleness about him, where he was able to meet, dignitaries and politicians in different countries and at the highest level and be able to get in the door and talk with them about, spreading the game and building basketball courts and getting infrastructures in place for countries and to get involved in this sport. And he was just a great global ambassador, and what a genuine person he was, who was grateful for the opportunities he got in this country to do what he loved to do, and then was all about giving back to that after his career. And what a loss for the game of basketball. What a loss for humanity in general to have someone like him pass away at such an early age.
Yeah, well said. All right, coming up next, the Jazz open up training camp. It is that week in pro basketball, so we'll do a little Jazz coming up on the other side. Also, Donovan Mitchell loves Cleveland because he can dress for the cold, and he's excited about the future. Where have we heard that before? We'll get Smitty's take on that. I want to tell you about my friends at Diamond Coat. Diamond Coat Premium Home Siding. They're new here along the Wasatch Front. You won't believe what they can do to your home's exterior. Diamond Coat Siding Next Generation System delivers the exterior transformation you deserve to level up to the neighborhood standard. They are the total design solution that shows your personal style with endless styles and colors for limitless customization. And their 30-year no-fade warranty means your vision will last for decades to come. Design beyond limits, beyond expectations with Diamond Coat. Now available in the Salt Lake City area. Premium home siding, limitless potential, endless styles and colors. They're your total design solution. They're year-round, weather-ready, durable in all seasons. Discover more at diamondcoatsiding.com. That's Diamond Coat, spelled Kote, siding.com. All right, some Jazz coming up with Smitty live in studio. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. We got Scott Mitchell stopping by today at 4 o'clock to talk some Utah football. Then the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, will be our guest after that. So some college football coming your way. We'll get back at that coming up in a bit. Smitty is live in studio. The great Richard Smith, 40 years with the Jazz front office. Speaking of college football, Smitty, we might have two really good teams in our state. We got little Utes, little Cougars. Both look like they're pretty good this year. Hey, let's get Smitty's mic on. All right, let's try again. Just so you know, I cannot control your mic or my mic in the studio. So
is that okay? Are we okay?
Yeah, you're good now.
Is that good?
A couple of good. It's always better when they're both good teams, right?
Hey, there's probably some other factors involved in going, hey, we've heard enough of that guy already. Somebody cut his mic off or something.
No, it's a much more nuanced, explanation, one that we'll leave off air for today. But you're a man of the community. We got both BYU and Utah football looking solid.
No, hey, I've been to the U games, the last few games at home, and went to the game the other night, and I thought Arizona just outplayed them. What they really did for me was that Arizona, every time they had a critical third down play, they made the play, and you have to give them credit for that. They went out and got it. I didn't think it was something so-called that the U gave away or lost as much as Arizona came and took it from them. And so you have to give them credit. They just played better, and BYU is off to a tremendous start. And the quarterback seems like he's settling in, and they've had a couple close calls, but they've been good enough to make the plays when they had to make them. In football, a lot of times it comes down to one or two critical plays or a key turnover, in the second half of a game. But they're both fun to watch, and it's fun to see how this season evolves, with the whole Cam Rising, Isaac Wilson thing, and what's going to happen as we get into through the month of October, and where they're both sitting in setup for the big showdown in early November up at Rice Eccles between the Cougars and the Utes.
I wanted to kick the tires with you on this topic because Donovan Mitchell in a way that the rest of us just don't. I mean, you were with the team when you drafted him. You were there at the start. You watched his evolution, and I was over there, but on the radio side, you don't have the same access, obviously, as you do on the player personnel side. And whenever Donovan speaks, folks around here seem to glom on to what he talks about. It was the same thing with Hayward. When Gordon bounced, everybody around here was like waiting for him to say something that ultimately he never said until he retired. And I get the deal, that, so do you. What Donovan said yesterday during Cleveland Media Day caught a lot of attention around here because he said, I love it here. I feel a connection to the city. I don't mind cold weather. I know how to dress for winter. And honestly, if you closed your eyes, it was back during his rookie year when he said those things about Utah, right? And so that's the game. You're supposed to say those things.
Yeah,
now, we could get into, New York didn't want him, and now they don't need him. Brooklyn's rebuilding. The Knicks have Jalen. There's no way the Knicks were going to make a play for Donovan Mitchell, and Brooklyn doesn't want to be good. So the fact of the matter is he can say whatever he wants. He signed with Cleveland.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Right. After it became pretty apparent that was just the deal. He could make more money staying put. That's my opinion. And I, like you, I'm not up in arms about these things because you're taught to say certain things to appease a fan base. But it was somewhat comical that if you closed your eyes, it did sound like what Donovan said about Salt Lake.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I'm one of those who probably feels more that coming from him that both times he spoke in that regard, that he probably meant it. He liked being here in Salt Lake when he first got here, and he really ingratiated himself within the community and made a lot of stuff off the court. Took initiative to get involved in the community and did that, and I think he really liked that. I think that's part of his personality. And I think now that he's in Cleveland and he signed a new deal with them, Spence, I believe he probably feels genuinely that way. I think he likes where he is, but certainly right after signing an extension for $150 million, you're not going to say, well, I don't really like the weather. I don't know about this traffic I got to deal with every day. But, I'll figure it out.
Food scene's not great.
Whatever. Yeah, So, I don't begrudge him any of that. I think he's also got a lot of weight on his shoulders with that team now. moving forward. They've got a new coach in Kenny Atkinson, and they hired Johnny Bryant to be on their staff, so they hired him away from the New York Knicks staff, and Johnny Bryant was Donovan's workout development guy from day one on the Jazz coaching staff, and so they have a unique relationship, and so they're reunited in Cleveland, and now he's the big dog with a lot of young guys there, and they've got a good team, and I'm sure he's excited for them to be able to start making some progress, especially as their younger players start to get more experience under their belts.
All right, Smitty, before we move over to the Jazz, and that's where we'll spend the rest of our time after this topic, you don't get a ton of big NBA trades in September and October, but you get some. And by the way, Donovan was traded in September.
Yes.
So sometimes it happens. More often than not, this time of year, teams know what sort of hand they've been dealt. They're preparing for camp with their roster. But the Knicks and the Wolves make a deal last Friday. It was a Friday news dump where Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo are now Minnesota-bound, and Karl Anthony Towns is going back to play for Tom Thibodeau, who had him in Minnesota, I believe, for a little bit. I think I want your thoughts, essentially. I think the talent win is in New York's court. I have curiosities about how Tom's going to handle that rotation because it will be, I believe, Cat, Anunoby, Hart, Bridges, and Brunson. And that's a team with some great wing defenders, but not a lot of size, and a center that doesn't board great for his size. I mean, Cat can do a lot, but what do you make of this? Both sides, Randall, DiVincenzo, Minnesota-bound, Cat heads to New York.
Yeah, I think it's New York is shoring up the center position. Of course, they lost Isaiah Hartenstein in the offseason as a free agent to Oklahoma City. They're the Robinson kid who's got some talent and can affect winning some nights at the NBA level. He's been hard for them to count on because of his injury history. He seems to always be in and out. And so you can't count on his availability. So if you're going to be a team that feels like you have a legitimate chance to make some kind of extended run in the spring, then you need somebody that you can count on more and more consistently during the course of the season. And I think that was an impetus for the Knicks to make the move to get an all-star caliber player in Karl Anthony Towns at a position where they needed some stability and needed a main guy, and they got one. For Minnesota, it always seemed like Rudy Gobert and Towns were kind of bumping into each other. I mean, they're both natural centers. They tried to play Towns at the 4. They had some success with it, right? But it always felt like it was a square peg in a round hole as far as their lineup was concerned. And now that frees up their spacing a little bit more. They get Randall in there, and Randall is a great mid-post scorer who can bring them some offense. You lose a lot of offense in that regard, but you have a little bit better lineup, I think, in terms of how your starting 5 is structured for Minnesota. And then you add DiVincenzo, who's one of the top 5 3-point shooters last year in the league, and can certainly help you space the floor with the other shooters they have, especially with Edwards now emerging as a main guy in the league. So I think it's one of those trades, Spence, that for me, when I saw it, I kind of looked at it for a few minutes, kind of thought about it, looked at a few stats, a few things, and thought, yeah, it makes sense for both teams. I don't think either team was trying to get the upper hand. I think both teams are doing something that they felt made sense for their group and how they're currently set up, and they both made the moves with an eye toward feeling like we can be half a step better with what we're trying to do if we can make this kind of move. And I think that's where they both feel at this time.
So let's move over to the Jazz now. I want to start here. Howard Beck from The Ringer, formerly of the New York Times, formerly of, everywhere, Sports Illustrated, Los
Howard
Angeles.
not keep a job? Is that what you're telling me?
Howard might be my favorite NBA writer. I'm surprised he's never stayed in one place, but he's landed on his feet as he does every time one company lets him go.
No, he's very good at what he does.
And every year he writes what he calls the Clarity Index. Okay, so what that is not necessarily a composite ranking of NBA teams. It's Howard's opinion on what they are trying to do currently. And with some NBA teams, it's really easy to understand what they're trying to do. The Knicks obviously are all in now. They're trying to win. And we could go down the list of teams that are serious about winning, teams that are not, and teams that are obvious about not being serious about winning. Here's what he says about the Jazz. Quote, and now for the Jazz. They might be the most confusing of all. A team that jettisoned its 2 All-Stars 2 years ago isn't good enough to make the playoffs, isn't bad enough to nab a high draft pick. They could have dealt Lauri Markkanen a dozen times by now, but they instead gave him an extension that makes him trade ineligible until next summer. They're neither trying to win nor are they trying to lose, the epitome of a franchise with an identity crisis. What's the Richard Smith take on that?
Well, I think that what they've, the first 2 years of this so-called retooling or rebuilding or tear down or whatever, however you want to label it, I can see where people, fans, writers, media people would be confused because they saw that they were having some modicum of success early in each of those seasons, and then went ahead at the trade deadline and traded the guys who were helping them to do that. But I think those were things that they saw as ways of trying to shore up their draft stockpile and trying to get figure out where they actually were as a team. Now I think that they have a commitment to playing their young guys. So whether you like that or not, whether that's going to mean more losses or the same number of wins, I don't know. But I think it's going to be hard for them to have any level of success, at least this coming season, in any consistent fashion, because it seems like, from what I understand, they're going to play a lot of their young guys a lot of minutes, and they're going to roll with what's going on. And if that yields fewer wins and they get closer to the lottery land and all that, I think that's probably okay with them. I do think the marketing thing, adds a little wrench in there, but I do think that if you're trying to build a team, when you find a guy and you can get a guy and then you can hold on to him and someone at his level, he's an all-star level player, he's right in his prime, he wants to be here, and for them to lock him up, for me, that made a lot of sense because, whether that translates to wins or losses or we're not going to be bad enough now or whatever, when you get a good player like that and you can get him to commit to you, then you have to do that. That's the first building block. Now you got all these other young guys that you're trying to sift through. It's like the guy, it's like the old guy mining for gold, Spence, in the river. He gets the big sifter out and he gets all the dirt in it and he starts shuffling it around and he's hoping he has a gold nugget or two in that when all the dirt and the silt goes away. And that's what the Jazz are doing now. They're trying to figure out, okay, we got all these young guys. We're going to see who can play, who can't play. We're going to see who we like, who we don't like. We're going to see who the coach thinks can get something done down the road. And that's where we're at right now. And in the meantime, Markkanen will be our star player. And whether he affects winning to any level that adversely affects their lottery situation, that's something that they'll deal with, as they go along. But you have to keep good players when you have them. Although that, again, that goes against what the current group decided to do a couple of years ago when they had a lot of good players and got rid of all of them. But that's what they decided to do. So now this is the new iteration of just what they're going through to try and build a team that they think at some point can be sustainable down the road.
So give me your best guess on how this is going to go, because I often look at the Vegas over-unders where the guys in Vegas are pretty accurate. as far as, predicting how the season's going to go, and history will tell you that they know what they're doing. So they have the consensus over-under for the Jazz is 29.5. So Vegas is telling us the Jazz are going to win about 30 games. Okay, so, initially at first glance, that is problematic if you want to believe that the Jazz need to do everything they can to have draft capital to take a guy like Cooper Flagg, who it appears as of now will be the number one pick, and you always point out, and then we'll see, right? Like everybody seems to believe he's one of these generational pieces. No one ever knows. Wembanyama, LeBron, there are exceptions where it feels like, all right, just take the dude because he's going to be that guy. We'll see if Cooper Flagg is. People that do this for a living believe that he is in a way that I don't do it for a living. So the teams they have below the Jazz are the Hornets, the Bulls, the Raptors, the Pistons, the Nets, the Blazers, and the Wizards. So that's 7 teams that Vegas is telling us is worse than the Jazz, putting the Jazz at 8. Now, lottery odds have been flattened, as we've talked about. So even if you go all in on losing, you're not going to get one. Ask Detroit. And Zanuck, at their media availability on Friday of last week, basically alluded to the fact that we have a lot of young players that we like, but the only way for us to know who they are is for them to get playing time. So does that indicate we're going to see a starting lineup, a rotation full of these young players? What does this mean for Clarkson and Sexton and Markkanen and John Collins? I mean, Lowry's going to start and play is my guess. But how is this going to look, trying to get the young players some minutes and experience while you still have some proud, highly paid vets on your roster?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be surprised if one or more of those guys were on the move, between now and February. I mean, if you're going to go all in with the young guys and you're going to try and sift through and see, is Collier a real NBA-level point guard? Is Keontae George more of a scoring 2 off the bench than he is a lead point guard? Or can he play point guard? Are we going to let him have a lot of those minutes like they were the second half of last year, and to see what kind of development he brings to the table? Can Hendricks, whose body looks much better now than it did 6 months ago, he's put on some off-season muscle and is starting to mature into his body. Will he be able to give you some impactful minutes going into the season? The Filipowski kid they got in the early second round, might be a steal in terms of having a guy who could at least come in and be a rotation guy and actually give you some minutes and be like an all-around type player. It'll be interesting to see his development. So I do think that the Jazz powers that be are looking at it and saying, okay, we got all these guys now, the young guys. Now we got to figure out who can play, who we want, who we want to move on from. So they're going to be doing all of that. I mean, the older guys, whether it's Clarkson, whether it's Collins, Sexton is I like Sexton. He's young enough. He still should be considered one of the young guys to me. But particularly Clarkson and Collins, I would be surprised if they were still on the roster come the end of February, just because I think they're guys who, Clarkson you can move, I think, a little bit easier because his number isn't as big now. It went from 24 to 14. So now he becomes a guy that teams that are in the hunt, after the first of the year that need a scorer off the bench, becomes attractive to teams like that. Collins would be a little bit tougher because of his big number. So that may be someone at some point where if they can't move him, they have to some kind of a buyout agreement or something. But it just seems to me that they're going to go in with the young guys. And if you're going to go in, then you got to play them and play them and play them and just see how it falls and who's showing up as the season goes on.
All right, Smitty, before I set you loose, I want to ask you a question. And we alluded to this a little bit last year. And you take us into the mindset of roster construction and what this process looks like. And, I remember Dennis Lindsay always had his 5-year plan on his whiteboard and, looking ahead to the future and what does it look like when our best players are in their prime, juxtaposed to what the other teams in our conference look like. There's no perfect way to do this, and there's no one way to do this. I understand that. There are a bunch of different approaches. I think there are some that are tried and true and others that are a little bit more unproven. I'll just ask you, generally speaking, does the glut of young, really good teams that are far ahead of the Jazz change the timeline, change the calculation when you look at OKC not going anywhere for a while and being awesome? I could keep going, as you know.
Yeah.
Dallas, Luka, I mean, even the Nuggets with Jokic, he's in his prime, and he's going to be good for 4 or 5 years. Because for a while, for me, it was like, well, Steph's going to age, LeBron's going to age, Durant's going to age, and then Donovan and Rudy and these guys, they'll be ready when they're done. Now, the franchise decided to pivot and make a change. What's your opinion on that? Does the glut of young, really good teams far ahead of the Jazz in the process change the way the Jazz look at this timeline?
For me, it doesn't, Spencer, and this is why. Because when you are a young, good team, what's right around the corner that you're always dealing with from a management and ownership perspective is how are we going to keep these guys, meaning who gets paid and who doesn't get paid. When you look at it in the landscape of the NBA, Oklahoma City, which is in a great position right now with not only good young players and a very competitive team, but also a lot of draft picks in their back pocket still. So they still have a lot of room for maneuverability. But you go back a decade ago, they had the same setup with guys who were even a little bit better, okay? They drafted in successive drafts Kevin Durant, James Harden, Russell Westbrook. Those three guys should still, if it was a perfect NBA world, from an ownership perspective, they should still be playing together in Oklahoma City and be sitting on 2, 3, 4 championships. But it didn't work out that way. They were a good young team. They went to a finals, and then what happens? Everybody comes knocking at the door, and they want theirs. And no matter how you talk to them and how you try and divvy it up and how you try and massage egos and whatever it is, it rarely works the way you want it to. So guys start going out the door one after the other. And now, of course, Oklahoma City has rebuilt themselves, but none of those guys are with them. So the teams that you're relating to now that are in front of the Jazz, you don't know how they're going to be able to stay together. You don't know how it's going to work. You have to worry about how you're building your group and how you're progressing and to what extent you want to keep that going financially and also with the personnel you have. And then what happens elsewhere, you have no control over, whether it's that OKC example or the one that was more recent in Brooklyn where they stacked up all the guys and those three guys played 16 games together. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, when you step back and look at the history of it, you go, you remember when they all came together, everybody was like, those guys, they're going to be a headache for 5, 6, 7 years. They're going to be running the show. And it never happened, right? So the answer to your question, the Jazz should just stay on the timeline they're on. They should do it the way they think is going to make sense for them going down the road, and you stick to that, and you don't worry about the other people on the outside, the other teams, and you just go with what you believe makes the most sense to what's going to get you to where you're trying to go in the long run. It's tough. It's a long deal, and it doesn't guarantee you're going to get there, right? But you have to have the conviction that makes sense to you and your group, and you go with that. And I think Lauri Markkanen, the signing of him is the first step in that direction.
All right, Smitty, great to have you back. Great to see you. Have a good week, and we'll chat soon, okay?
Okay, man. Thank you.
Richard Smith, 40 years with the Jazz front office. Scott Mitchell is going to join us coming up next. Then it's Bill Riley, but we welcome in now Doug from Farmer and Chemist. Doug, happy Tuesday. How we doing?
Thank you, brother. Happy Tuesday to you as well. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, appreciate your time today. So let's talk about what I can personally attest to, and that is the power of CBD and the products you have when it comes to helping people who don't sleep very well, whether it's kind of restless leg syndrome or you're kind of laying there, your mind's going crazy. You helped me get some stuff a few months ago. It's really helped me out sleeping. How can you help our listeners who have trouble sleeping?
Sleep is one of the most important things that we do, frankly. We get up, we do things all day long, and if we can't get a good night's rest, then we're just messed up the next day. So we have formulated what I think is the best CBD products for sleep. in one little gummy that tastes good, doesn't have a nasty CBD aftertaste. We've packed 35 milligrams of CBD, 5 milligrams of CBN, and 4 milligrams of THC. We also have THC-free gummies. And these are the magic to settle your mind at night. After you take the gummy in about 45 minutes, your mind is rested, you're still alert and able to do things, but your body is also ready to go to sleep. And it works like a little corny, it works like a dream every night without getting addicted like you can with some of the prescription drugs or feeling wasted the next day like sometimes happens with some of those prescription drugs also.
Yeah, let's get you off that Ambien. Let's get you off those sleep meds. Also, people out there struggling with muscle soreness, arthritis, just physical pain day to day. Strong pain medication also leads to addiction issues, as we know. CBD does not have those same addiction issues. So for our listeners that have physical pain every day, how can you help them at Farmer and Chemist?
So we've got gummies and tinctures that have a different cannabinoid. We have CBD still. We have THC or zero THC, and then we've added CBG, and CBG is a fabulous anti-inflammatory. It helps with pain and inflammation. So you can take that orally with a tincture or a gummy. You can apply it with our Problem Salved or our Skin for Structure or our Chill Out, an amazing roll-on, and just put it right on the tissue with the topical products, or take it orally by mouth, and just like you would another medicine, and gives you whole body relief that lasts about 24 hours. It's really amazing. It works. It's safe. It does not require a prescription. It's not going to eat up your stomach like ibuprofen will after a long time. It's not going to hurt your liver like acetaminophen or Tylenol does. And, it really is amazing for pain, whether topically applied or taken in a gummy.
All right, Doug, before I set you loose, for listeners that may have questions, unfamiliar, a lot of people are probably unfamiliar with this form of remedies, and maybe they have misconceptions and ideas in their head that just aren't true. What's the best way for them to get more information from you guys at Farmer and Chemist?
Coming to the store. We're located at 7719 South Main Street in Midvale. It's a beautiful store. It's well lit. We have an amazingly trained staff where you can come in and chat with us. We'll help you find the right product to treat whatever is ailing you. And it's not for everybody. So we'll also tell you that. So we hope that people can trust the information that we're providing to them. You can also go online at farmerandchemist.com and call us at the store, and we're happy to chat anytime.
Doug, thank you, sir, for the time. Appreciate it. We'll chat soon, okay?
Absolutely. And don't forget ESPN 700 to get a discount.
That's right. That's right. Farmer and Chemist. Check him out, farmerandchemist.com. Upon checkout, use ESPN 700 to get 20% off. I can attest to what their gummies will do as far as helping you sleep well at night, and then just get more information. It's still kind of a new thing here in the state. So if you have questions about CBD products that can help you with muscle pain or sleep, check them out at Farmer and Chemist. All right, Scott Mitchell is our guest, coming up next right here on ESPN 700. It's a bye week for the Utah Utes, hoping for a get-right game against Arizona State. Arizona had a get-right game against the Utes, so hoping to kind of replicate that during this bye week. Our next guest knows a thing or two about the Utes. One of the best to ever do it up there, played in the NFL. I was hoping to have Scott Mitchell live in studio. As I walked into the building, he was present, but he has ditched us, and now he's over the phone. What happened, man? I thought you were coming in studio.
Yeah, life just throws a lot of curveballs at you. I mean, I also expected the Utes to just be amazing on Saturday night. I mean, dark mode, you're at home, you have all these Hall of Fame weeks, homecoming weeks, and they kind of laid an egg. So I'm sorry, Spence. I should have known better and should have just hung around.
It's all good, my friend. All good. I appreciate your time, whether it's in person or over the phone. So obviously, let's start with what happened on Saturday night. And Scott, I don't know how many times I've been in that stadium. I couldn't even guess, dating back to my time as a student or dating back to my time as a media member, which has now been 20 years. But I was there with my son. I was a season ticket holder once upon a time. I don't know that I remember, at least recently, Rice Eccles seeming so nervous, seeming so almost docile. I mean, there wasn't a lot to get excited about. And obviously, when the football is good, it's easier to cheer. But start to finish, it just felt like a really strange night, right? So just overall, what were your takeaways from Arizona's win over Utah on Saturday?
No, it's very astute because it was strange, and there was a weird vibe there, and there was a weird vibe with the team. And, you have games like this. You do. You have low-energy games. You have, a fatigue game. You just have one where you're just not quite together, Converting those fourth downs early in the game, that kind of tells you a little bit about where the mindset of this team is, because it's that do or die down. Like you don't get another one if you miss this. So you've got to have a sense of urgency about you, and it really wasn't there. And you can attribute it to a lot of things and say, team traveled, hot game, emotional game for what it was. You could have the fatigue of playing for 2 months now. You have a young quarterback who doesn't, he's never been through this, he's never felt this before, and you need your leaders to step up. And it's clearly a game that they needed Cam Rising, they needed his leadership. I think Karene Reed, they needed his leadership on defense because it was across the board. It wasn't just offense. There was a lackluster effort with the defense during the game, and I don't think they're coached that way. I don't think that they want to play that way. These guys love to play, they love to prepare, they love to get out there and do it. It's just sometimes you just have that night, and you just got to figure out how to fight through it. And it's the leaders internally that hey, we got to pick it up, guys. We got to change the tone, the feel, everything here. And you just didn't see it at all during the game.
Of course, Scott, the big topic of conversation around the market is Cameron. Is Cameron Rising, his availability, his lack thereof, the messaging from the football program, the messaging from coaches and players. I continue to be in the space where my heart goes out to him. I feel bad for him because I think he's hurt. And when he's healthy, I think he'll play. I'm not one for conspiracy theories in sports or elsewhere, but those are flying around as well. So I just want the Scott Mitchell take on the way this is being handled. And if you have any information about where we're at in the process of trying to get him back under center, obviously would love to hear from you on that as well. Yeah,
I think it's if you look at his history and you say this guy's brought a lot. When he's, the moment he stepped on the field, I still remember it. I still remember the team. He just elevated everyone's hope, everyone's, feeling like belief. Just what they played San Diego State. It was in Los Angeles. And the minute he stepped in, it was just different. And it was different the whole rest of that season. I remember him throwing some big, huge plays against USC in the Coliseum, and Utah hadn't beat USC. And they did, and it was Cam Rising having this moxie and this confidence to throw a ball on fourth down and short, and he throws it for a touchdown. I mean, there's just a lot of things that he has brought to the table, brought 2 championships, brought 2 Rose Bowls, and played in some big time games and came up big in a lot of those games. And he just is a guy that's uber competitive, but how it's hard to describe to people when there's like hurt and then there's injured, and they're two different things. And hurt is like, okay, this is just annoying. I'm going to suck it up and I have to play. And then there's injured, where it's like, if I play, I can't play well. Like, I'm going to do more damage to myself, to the team. And it's really a person individually that knows that. For whatever reason, Cam has had a lot of injuries. I mean, the first, he got named the starter. It was COVID. It was in against USC. He, destroys his shoulder very early in that game. He got injured, I think, both Rose Bowls, and so he's been injured, and of course now he's injured this year. And it's just, some guys just have those injuries, and I really think that he wants to be in the game. I had an injury one year. I had to get a shot just to practice every day. It was the worst thing in the world. And I got accused of this, you just don't, you're not playing, you're not tough enough, whatever. And it's just not the case. So I really think he will be out there. Part of it, Spence, it's really hard when you have people that are passionate about the program, these alumni people, these boosters, and they're so passionate, they put their money where their mouth is. Like, they donate a lot of money and a lot of effort into this program being well, and the school doing well, and to see someone who they're paying money to, not seeing a lot of return on that investment, that's hard, and that's hard to swallow. Man, I totally get that. I don't know that there's much control over how where that money goes and what happens with it. It's one of the really bad things about college football right now, and so people do expect those results. And I think Cam does. And look, Utah still controls their destiny. Colorado's 2 wins, BYU, Iowa State. Utah plays all of those teams. It's really early in the year. It's really a game that I think this team can really fuel themselves from the sting of it, and I'm still reeling from it. I'm just like, what the heck happened Saturday night? And a lot of times teams can really be fueled by this and move forward. You think of Tim Tebow when they won a national championship at Florida, and they had a loss like this, and he just said, never again, ever will this happen to me and to this football team, and they go on and win a national championship. So a lot of times you can turn some of these nasty, terrible, feel like the end of the program moments into, something that really propels you to greater heights.
So I want to get your opinion on the way that the program is handling the dissemination of information. And Dennis Dodd today wrote a piece where he talked about all the Power Four conferences utilize a guy named Matt Holt. Now, Matt is the founder of the U.S. Integrity in Las Vegas, which sounds like an oxymoron to me. As a gambling integrity monitor, that's
right.
What he does. But, when contacted about this situation specifically, here's what Matt Holt had to say. He said, quote, "We constantly tell our colleges, if you continue to hide information for gamesmanship or competitive advantage purposes, you are putting your student athletes, your trainers, your equipment managers, and your assistant coaches in a heightened risk category, is what we call it. When betting groups start to figure out, hey, this coach won't disclose information, now there's real value to getting that inside information. So sharks and wise guys and such, they lean on trainers and they lean on assistant coaches. They lean on players to get inside information to therefore utilize that to affect lines and make money. I don't love that this is where we're at in sports when they're in bed with the gambling companies and the apps. I think it's a really slippery slope. McKay Coppins from The Atlantic did a piece last week on the effects on families. Now that we have about 5 years of data of legalized gambling, what it has done. Some families have lost homes. It's divorce. It's debt. It's a really, really slippery slope. But we are where we are. And ultimately, it does look like, according to what I have in front of me from the CBS piece, these coaches that are holding back information are thought to be putting their staff in what's called a heightened risk category. Do you think stuff like this will change the way that the program is utilizing their platform to disseminate the information? And Do you think they should change the way they're going about it? For me, it feels unfair to Cam. That's my whole thing. But what's the Scott Mitchell take?
Boy, that is an interesting statement, because if you watch, we're sitting here all week long going, okay, is Cam playing? Is he not? Is he playing? Is he not? And then you watch the betting lines, and they change. And they change as the week goes on. And they change. I mean, at Oklahoma State, they were changing during, the day. And we looked at it, and I said, somebody knows something. And these people that set these lines, you talk about, like, they know, like, they're in the business of winning. They're not there to lose. So they're going to go and they're going to figure out how to get any possible information that they can get. And I'm sure those lines for the Utah the last couple of weeks were based on maybe information they got, like, hey, Cam Rising, he's not going this week because the lines changed and went down, and then they went back, and so someone somewhere is getting information. How they do it, who knows? Because your point about gambling, and it's so easy. Like so many things in our society today are so convenient. You can pretty much be anywhere, and I can gamble on a game. Shoot, I can gamble during the game. I can, it's just they've made it extremely easy, and who knows who's involved in gambling? It's something when I played in the NFL. It was like it was hammered into your brain: do not talk to, do not share, do not anything. The integrity of our game is so critical. And if anyone thought it was fixed, or if anyone thought, it would really destroy the whole, and it would, and it does. But we're human. I'm not a gambler. It's not my thing. I've never done it. I've never cared to do it. But I know a lot of people. I know a lot of people in sports. I know a lot of people who are playing sports are huge gamblers. And so, if you have the equipment manager, and I'm not saying that's the case, or you have some front office person who, I like to gamble, and then someone finds out they kind of like to gamble, and they go, hey, if you give us some insight onto whether Cam Rising is playing or not, we'll give you $1,000, or we'll give you whatever. I mean, who knows what, who knows? Or someone may be in trouble gambling, and they go, we'll take care of your problem here if you give us some insider information. These people in Vegas they'll find information, and they'll know, because they do not want to lose. And this whole setting these lines things is a science and something I have no idea, but they're pretty good at it. And so, I could see where it could really impact people inside of organizations. I'm still trying to, and gamesmanship is fine, right? Whatever, everyone has their thing. Everyone tries to find a way to get an edge, to be motivated. And I certainly did it. And I would do everything I could possibly do to figure out how to have an edge on my competition, knowing that they're doing the same thing. But I don't understand completely why you just don't tell people. In the NFL, it's pretty known. It's pretty out there. College football, these coaches have a pretty good feel of other programs and how their schemes and all of these different things. And it might be an advantage for a series or two or whatever. I don't know that it's a complete advantage if you don't know which player's playing or who's not playing. If it's anything, it just should be standard across the board. But I'm one that, I don't have a problem being transparent and kind of telling where players or people are. But, Coach Whittingham has never been that way, doesn't feel that way. He's like, look, if I don't have to share it, I'm not going to. And so he doesn't. And I don't have a problem with that either. But, the challenge with Cam is that he's getting paid. And he's getting paid a lot of money. And he hasn't played for, almost a year and a quarter, or a third, because we're even a little bit more than a third now. So that's unfortunately how things are. You get paid to do this. There's a different expectation, and now it comes with production and winning and the perception of production and winning, and that's a different deal, and that's called professional sports, and that's really what college football is.
So, Scott, final thing on this, and then we'll get to a couple of other quick topics before I set you loose. I'm just operating off the premise that it's Isaac until it's not. I don't have any knowledge on what the next couple of weeks are going to look like. It's easy to surmise that if we take Utah football on their word, but historically speaking, their word on this is not reliable, and we all understand why, competitive advantage, all that stuff. If Cameron was very close to playing against Arizona, I think it's safe to say that given 2 more weeks, we should expect him against Arizona State, but I'll go with the premonition that it's Isaac until it's not. What's your understanding of where we're at with Cam's health as of today?
Well, if long term this year right now, Cam Rising gives Utah the best chance to win big picture conference championship, win those tough games, really kind of be the guy to be that leader and lead this team and rise the level of expectation and play. And so you want him in there. With this injury, who knows what it is. And I've had injuries like this and fingers and getting hit on helmets and stretched ligaments and broken fingers and all kinds of things. And the reality is it's probably going to be a nuisance no matter what for the rest of the year. Who knows if it'll go away, just simply because if he's going to throw, he's going to play, he's just going to probably continue to aggravate it. So I don't know if there's ever a level of you're just completely healthy. And so it's kind of how much can you tolerate? How much can you suck up? How much can you not be distracted by it? Those 2 fingers, your ring finger and your middle finger, are not the most essential fingers throwing a football. It could impact your delivery. I don't know, but I would really. I'm going to disagree with you. I really think they're really trying hard to get Cam ready for Arizona State. I think it's something that I think he can play from. He didn't look good at Oklahoma State. He actually looked better because he threw a little bit before the Arizona game. But I think he's going to try. I think they're going to try to have him ready by then, and he probably should be able to play.
Yeah, I don't know what you're disagreeing with. I'm saying I'm operating off the premise that it's Isaac until it's not, because until I see it, it's hard to believe based off of all the information we've been giving. I agree that they're trying to get him ready to play, but until we actually see it, for me, it's time to kind of ignore the messaging. Until the Utes run out for their first possession on offense and it's number 7 and not 11, I'm going to operate off the premise that it's 11, not 7. I just need to see it before I can believe it.
Yeah, and that's probably a healthy attitude to have. And the silver lining with all of this is, man, Isaac Wilson's getting some great experience, and some of it painful. I'm just telling you, last week was painful, and the painful part is, son, you had, like, when you're in the red zone, come hell or high water, you got to figure out how to score, and you get those 4th downs, whatever it is, you got to make it happen, and you can't just. You just have to do it, and you have to will that on your team that this is extremely important. We got to get it done, and so there's just so many game scenarios or things that come up that Isaac's had to deal with, that being one of them, and they'll be so valuable down the road. But unfortunately, this team is ready to win now and has such a great opportunity in the Big 12, and because I still think it's very wide open in the conference. There's not a team I go, oh wow, that's just a dominant team right there, and so you really need to get the guy back who can make it happen. But it is good for Isaac for him to get that experience.
All right, Scott, before I set you loose, I referenced this earlier. Arizona, after the K-State loss, they talked about the Utah game as a get-right game for them after a bye. What does a get-right game look like for Utah after a bye against Arizona State?
Well, it's just playing with that sense of urgency, playing really to win and not kind of tight or playing not to lose. It's about being aggressive, and Arizona really took the tempo to the game, to Utah. They dictated terms the whole entire game, and that's what you have to do. You know, and I think that's the energy that people were feeling. They were like, these guys aren't intimidated by being here in the stadium and this noise and this crowd, this team. It's like they're here to win. They're here to you've got the target on your chest, and we're coming after you. And Utah is going to get that all year, but they've got to have the Utes have to have this attitude that like every play is life and death. Like this really matters. Like you can't be complacent in any moment, and that includes all of your preparation leading up to this game. I'll bet if you went and asked and polled the players and the coaches and said, did you do everything you could possibly do to get yourself ready to play this week? And I'll bet almost all of them would say, no, there's things I could have done better. And that's the cruelty of football. That's the immediacy of it, that you only get so many opportunities. There's only 3 more home games this year. I mean, there's 3. That's it, you know. And so you have to take advantage of those opportunities. They have to be so precious to you, and you just have to come out with this, like, we just got to let everything hang out and just play to win. And we always said, play like men and just, you know, let it all hang out. And that's the way you got to play.
All right, buddy. Appreciate the time today. Bye week, and then we'll see you what they're made of when they get back on the field. Scott, have a good week, brother, okay?
All right, thanks. You too. We'll see you.
Scott Mitchell, former Utah quarterback, number of years in the NFL. Appreciate his time today. More Utah football coming up next with the voice himself. Bill Riley is our guest. Let's welcome in Ryan from the Dish Pros. It's been 5 weeks of college football, 4 weeks of pro football. I have not missed one single game. The games I don't watch live are there for me on my DVR when I get home from golf or work or something like that. And DVR is great. It's brand new equipment. You upgrade. It's quicker. You support a local company. You save money. I'm not sure what you're waiting for. Hopefully you have all the football at your disposal. If you don't, it's time to dial 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
Yes, it is. And, you know, crazy cool news going on right now. Dish and DirecTV emerging. And, you know, this really places the urgency. Listen, if you are out of contract with either one of those providers, you know, they're going to become one. And this is your opportunity, or one of your last opportunities, to take advantage of the new customer promotions, especially because it's just so much cheaper. Call us up and get the very best deal. We've got the fantastic promotions for both Dish and DirecTV, huge credits, price guaranteed, movie channels. With Dish, we got the NFL Red Zone. Still, that promotion is going to be going away, but you get that free for a year. And we'll get you the best price guaranteed, and have you installed as early as next day. Call us up. Take advantage of these deals. Save some money. We've got fantastic internet offers. Guys, one of those providers, this is the one I've been using, fantastic product. No commitment, no contract, and there's a $200 gift card attached to it. And trust me, if you're spending close to $200 or more, it's just cash that you're throwing away. Call us. We'll save you $60, $100+ a month. 424-DISH. Call us, 801-424-3474.
All right, Ryan from the Dish Pros. Bill Riley is our guest. Coming up next right here on ESPN 700. Got a little Major League Baseball wild card action for you guys tonight when we say goodnight at 6 o'clock, Atlanta, San Diego. It is that time of year. It is fall, which means playoff baseball. But, of course, football-centric right now, college football-centric right now, Utah football-centric right now. Our next guest is not only the voice of the Utes, he now does not have to grow a mullet, which makes me very sad. Bill Riley is our guest. Bill, for the past couple of months, if I've ever been in a bad mood, which at times happen, I don't know if you know that about me. At times that can happen. I picture you calling games in a mullet, and now that dream has died. So I guess I just have to say congratulations.
Well, thank you. I was actually, it would have been a great, it would have been that win-win. You get me and I got to call an undefeated regular season. It would have been kind of a win for everybody. And then, everybody that got to mock me as well. I will say this, though. The Kansas City Royals had just beaten the Baltimore Orioles.
Atta guy.
And if the Kansas City Royals win the World Series, I will grow that mullet for you, Spence.
Whoa! So are you saying the Bill Riley mullet watch is back on?
It's a longer shot, I think, than the undefeated season because your Yankees are a bit of a juggernaut this year. But I will say this: if the Royals win the World Series, mullet watch is on. I've reinstalled mullet watch, and there's still a chance.
You've made my heart so happy. Okay, because that's really all I want to see in my life is you calling a game with a mullet. But we can move on from that, Riles. Hey, I'll tell you what. We just had Scott on. I don't know how many games I've been to in the stadium, dating back to my time as a student, then as a season ticket holder, now as a media member. I don't really know how to describe the way Saturday night felt. And we'll talk about the game, but just the atmosphere, you've got to give them something to cheer for. And there wasn't a lot to cheer for, but the building just felt a little docile, a little nervous. How would you describe the atmosphere at Rice Eccles on Saturday night?
I'll say this. I was expecting a little bit more electricity. I had visions of like a USC, I know the game wasn't on that level, but with the first night game in a couple of years of meaning and in a blackout game, but it wasn't there. There was, Utah seemed a little flat, and the fans even seemed a little flat on Friday night or on Saturday night, which is unusual for both parties. To be very fair, Utah should have probably come out maybe with a little bit more juice, and I thought there'd be. It was loud, but it was. You and I have both been in that stadium when it was deafening loud on a blackout Saturday night. So I was a little surprised by that too.
All right, now moving over to the actual game, I just want your overall takeaways before we dig into some specifics. We'll get to the health stuff. We'll get to the Cam stuff. What went wrong? Why do you think they weren't able to counterpunch? Ultimately, what is the Bill Riley take on why Arizona rolled into Rice Eccles and smacked the Utes pretty good?
They didn't get a consistent pass rush on Noah Fafita when he threw. I thought they got better as the game went along. It looked like Tetro McMillan was going to have about 200 yards after the first quarter, but guy didn't have a catch in the second half. But I think they missed Connor O'Toole up front, Spence, and I think they missed Karenni Reed as well. Reed is kind of as good as Lander Barton is. I kind of feel like Reed is the heartbeat of that defense, and Connor O'Toole is so good off the edge. They don't have as much depth at defensive end as they do at defensive tackle. And not having O'Toole in that game, who's got the ability to chase a guy like Fafita. And again, Arizona didn't run it a bunch, but when they ran it, they really ran it. And I think really the last couple of games, you've seen them miss Karenni Reed. And I know after the bye week, they're hoping they have both those guys back. I don't have any kind of status update, but I know that was kind of the buzz around, the stadium on Saturday was – get this game, have a couple of weeks to heal up, and then we hope to have, they hope to have those guys both back after the bye week. We'll see how that goes.
So, of course, that moves over to the quarterback conversation. And Dennis Dodd today, you wrote a piece for CBS Sports, Dennis, friend of the show, stopped by for Big 12 Media Day. And Dennis's assertion is this ambiguity and the messaging around Cameron's injury is putting Kyle's staff in a precarious spot as a result of what we deal with now, since all of sports, college and pro football, college and pro basketball, are in bed with gambling companies. So there's a gentleman who all of the P4 conferences use. Let me get his name right. His name is Matt Holt. He's the founder of the U.S. Integrity in Las Vegas, which seems like an oxymoron, as a gambling integrity monitor. And here's the quote that Dennis has in his piece today. He says, quote, this comes from Mr. Holt. Quote, we constantly tell colleagues, if you continue to hide information for gamesmanship or competitive advantages purposes, you are putting your student athletes, trainers, equipment managers, and assistant coaches in what we call a heightened risk category. When betting groups start to figure out, hey, this coach won't disclose any information, there's real value in getting that inside information, and oftentimes they lean on lower-level staffers. Now, I can't corroborate any of that, and my personal opinion is Cameron is hurt, and he will play when he's healthy. But the community is kind of tired of this entire back and forth, Bill. I know you have to be careful, so don't put yourself in a bad spot, not like you would. But what do you make of where we're at with this entire thing and kind of the Cameron rising fatigue felt by a lot of people in the community?
Well, I think like a lot of people, I get my phone blows up when, he doesn't play. And to be very fair, they've been even guarded around me and not really disclosed a lot of details to me. And that's fine. They're allowed to do whatever they want to do with that stuff. But I sense the same frustration that fans feel because I hear it from a lot of my friends and people in the media and things like that. And people want to know. And I said, I wish I could tell you. I don't know what that situation is. But I think to your point, the fatigue part of it is because it's 2 years in a row of the guy that you're counting on so much dealing with injuries. Now, I do believe this one is different than a year ago. And I know he's hurt, and I know the finger has bothered him. And we've seen him warm up and try to throw. We didn't see that a bunch last year. Maybe it was one game when he came out. But I think that, it's something that I know the kid really well. And I know you guys around the station do because he comes in and does a conversation every week. He wants to play football, and he wants to play football in the worst way. And Cam wants to play on Sundays, too. In fact, the matter is you've got to put some football on tape if you want to get drafted. So I know there's fatigue around it, and I do know this, that Isaac Wilson is making, some mistakes that freshmen make from time to time. But what I do see from his teammates is that the fact that they're kind of buying into what Isaac's doing out there, and I think they respect a lot that this kid just kind of doesn't act like a freshman. He comes in, he plays hard, he gives it what he has. But at the end of the day, I think if Utah wants to get where they want to get, and there's everything still on the board. I mean, one loss isn't going to sidetrack you, especially in the playoff era. But I think this bye week, Spence, comes at a good time for not just a guy like Rising, but for this team to kind of exhale just a little bit after what was a tough month, and then a couple of guys on the defensive side of the ball that you'd like to get back to. So I think it's a good week to have the bye. You get two of them this year now. Utah will have another one before the BYU game, but I think it's a good time for all that for Utah.
So we had Brian Jeffries on the show, who's the Bill Riley of Arizona, just not as much Riz. You know what Riz means, right, Riles?
No, tell me, is that something the kids say?
The kids say that for charisma. So Brian Jeffries is the Bill Riley, just a little less Riz, because we know you got the Riz, Riles. And he called the Utah game a get-right game for Arizona after a bye week. What does a get-right game for Utah football look like after a bye week in Tempe against Arizona State?
I think it's the same thing you say. Here's the thing. Arizona, they didn't just lose to Kansas State. They got beat 31-7, and they had to sit on that for 2 weeks. Arizona's a good football team, but they didn't look like it against Kansas State. Kansas State's a good football team, but they didn't look like it against BYU. So you got a lot of good football teams. I don't know if there's a great team in this conference right now, Spence. You got a lot of good teams in this league. But what Utah's got to do is what Arizona had to do 2 weeks before. They've got to sit on it. They've got to hear about it for a couple of weeks. But they've got to bring a little bit more juice. I think there was a feeling maybe among fans, maybe a little bit among the team that maybe, hey, it's a blackout game. Hey, we owe Arizona a little something. Okay, they just lost the game at K-State. This atmosphere, and they didn't. Arizona came in and they didn't flinch. They were well prepared. I think Utah has to do all that same stuff. Now, the team they're playing is much improved, Arizona State. And going down to Tempe on a Friday night against an improved team that may have another win under their belt, be 4-1. I think they play Kansas this week, who's not very good. You may be stepping into another hostile atmosphere. And so I think Utah's got to do what Arizona did, kind of look within itself a little bit and bring a little bit more juice when they come to the field against the Arizona State Sun Devils.
So as you reference, everything's still on the table. I didn't push back on the narrative that the Big 12 had a bunch of parity because I didn't believe it to be true. I just didn't want it to be true because this year for me, I'm just more about Utah football protecting themselves as opposed to latching on to the Big 12 because the reality of where we're headed as a sport, we all know about. You just have to be in the best position you possibly can for yourselves to make sure that when everything actually does split off into this super conference that most people believe we're headed towards, you're in a good spot to be invited. So my thing this year is Utah football has to watch out for Utah football as opposed to let's carry a Big 12 banner. So I was hoping that Utah could, kind of separate themselves a little bit from the pack. That still has a chance to happen, but we have seen that parity manifest in a way that most people thought that it would. How many teams, Bill, today do you feel confident in saying can actually still win this conference?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think Utah can still win it. I think Kansas State can still win it. I think BYU, through 5 games, has showed they've got a chance to win it. Here's the thing I think about Kalani's team. I don't think they're maybe as talented as Utah or maybe even Kansas State overall. But you know what they do every week? They play really hard. They maximize what they have, and as a result, they're 5-0. So I think BYU, I think Utah, I think Kansas State, I think Arizona, Iowa State, and this is going to sound crazy, Spence. I'm going to throw Colorado in there just for a minute because as much as a lot of people would love to see Dion and his boys fall down, outside of going to Nebraska, which is a tough place to play, they've been okay. And they went on the road. UCF was supposed to be one of those sleeper teams, and they doubled up UCF in Orlando in a rainstorm. So those would be the teams right now. I think there's 5. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll say 6. So I think 6 right now are still in the mix that I think can make a legitimate case to win this league.
I want to follow up about BYU because I said last week that BYU, in my opinion, still had serious questions to answer against Baylor on the road. Now, I was on the sideline for the Utah-Baylor game, and Baylor's offense is not all that impressive, and BYU nearly let Baylor get back into the game. But nonetheless, they won. They stayed clean. That defense, year 2 under Jay Hill, looks like a defense that is coached by Jay Hill and whose head coach is Kalani. They're going to see Arizona after a bye in Provo. Then they have Oklahoma State in Provo as well, at UCF, at Utah. So they have a lot of tough games left. But let's give credit where credit is due, man. They're clean through 5 games. Just how good, Bill, do you think BYU is?
I don't know how good they are, Spence, but I came into the year thinking I didn't think they were good. I thought they'd be an average to slightly below average team. And to be fair, I just didn't know a lot about them because there just wasn't a lot of information. They didn't name their quarterback till midway or late in camp, and I didn't have a very good feel for them. So I was kind of judging them based on the second half of the season last year where it kind of felt like the Big 12 caught up with them a little bit. Well, what they've done is they've come out, they're relatively healthy. They don't beat themselves a bunch with mistakes. They've capitalized. I mean, K-State gifted them a bunch of turnovers. You know what they did? They turned them into touchdowns. They didn't kick field goals. They turned them into touchdowns. And again, I'll say this, and this is kind of Kalani's teams have always really done this. They play really hard. So when you play hard and you don't beat yourself, you give yourself a chance to stay in games. And they've done just that, and they're 5-0.
All right, Riles. Well, for your sake and my sake, I'll be cheering for the Royals. But let me get this. If the Yankees win the World Series, can we get one of those hipster mustaches that all the kids have these days maybe on you?
No, I'm afraid. Now they're a favorite. You know what I mean? If they were transposed, if they were the wild card team, maybe I'd do it. But no, probably not.
All right, then go Royals. I'm all about it, Riles. Thanks for the time today, buddy. Have a good week, okay?
Thanks, Spence.
All right, the voice himself, Bill Riley. Always appreciate his time. Let's welcome in Ryan from the Dish Professionals. 5 weeks of 5 weeks of college football, 4 weeks of pro football. I've seen every single game that I've wanted to see. The ones that I'm busy for, I just tag on my DVR. They're there when I get home. Make the switch to Dish if you haven't yet. You'll save money. It's the best place to watch sports. All you need to do is dial 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
Yeah, give us a call. Let us work our magic. And, guys, the promotions are so good Listen, if you're out of a contract, not in a promotion anymore, you're probably spending a lot more than you should be. This is where we step in and help you and upgrade you. Better equipment, better offers, free stuff. That's always a good thing, right? Call us up and take advantage of these deals. If you haven't heard, it's going to happen. Dish and DirecTV are going to merge. So here's the thing. When you're going to be on the same company, you're not going to gain anything when they merge together. But if you make a switch, you get the new customer offer, then you're at least paying less money, getting a better offer. Listen, if you got either one of those products and you're unhappy, call us up. Let us give you the new customer offer, the new promotion, movie channels. We'll throw in the multi-sports pack with Dish, free for a year, which includes the NFL Red Zone. We'll throw in dinner at JCW's, and we'll have you installed for free. Plus, ask about the great internet offers we got out there. This is where we can truly save people a lot of money, including the phone bill. The cellular products that are out there are fantastic. Get a brand new iPhone 16, no trade-in, and like $60 a month. You can't even touch that with any other provider. Plus, Boost is actually using the biggest wireless provider in the nation's networked in towers. So your coverage is second to none. Call us 424-DISH. Let's get you upgraded and installed as early as next day. And we'll throw in dinner at JCW's, 801-424-DISH.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Bros. 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, wrapping up the show for a Tuesday afternoon. Lovely day outside. Good forecast this week. Hoping you're having a good start to your work week as we inch a little bit closer and closer to that weekend and the start of pro football on Thursday. Speaking of pro football, a couple pieces of news and notes that we missed. We were busy. Von Miller has been suspended 4 games for violating the NFL player conduct policy. No information, at least none that I've seen, on exactly what's going on there. Has been at least released as of now. He served a 6-game suspension for performance enhancing and drugs back in 2013. So that news came out, and also Devontae Adams has requested a trade from the Las Vegas Raiders, and they've informed teams that they will consider it and they're looking for a second-round pick and additional compensation for one of the best, most talented wide receivers in all of pro football. Gonzaga is high speed ahead to the Pac-12 in 2026, as we talked about. So obviously a lot of news in that direction. All right, Porter, you know how I referenced that my fantasy football team is depressingly bad?
I recall, yeah.
It's even worse than I thought.
Oh, really?
So, like a good fantasy football score is about 115, 120 points week in and week out. You put up 120, you have a chance to win. 39 points. 39 points for my guys. So it's not just that it's bad, it's that it's historically bad, and I am the worst team in my league by far. Of course, injuries have riddled my roster, but my lineup of Will Levis, that didn't go well. Rashee Rice left with an injury. I could keep going on and on and on. I have Tyreek Hill. I have Joe Mixon, who didn't play. I have either completely underachievers. I have Puka Nacua. I have Tua Tagovailoa. I have either completely underachievers or total injured players on my roster, and it's just depressing. I just need to get that off my chest.
What's your team name?
Cannot say it on air.
No,
actually, I cannot. Thank you very much. Because I'm responsible.
Yeah.
I can show you the team name.
I am interested, so we'll get to that.
I will tell you the team name of the team I have in the RSL league, the Gerald Fitzgeralds.
That's a traditional one.
Yes, and
you'll win that league, right?
Probably. I mean, I always do. But my little logo is a picture of Trey in sunglasses inside because it makes me happy. So if your fantasy football team is as bad as mine, I'm feeling you guys. My heart's with you. Hang in there. All right, Porter, what comes our way on a Wednesday edition of this little old radio show?
On a Wednesday, Spence, we'll preview UFC 307. I'm really excited for that. Another really fun event here in Salt Lake City. You'll remember our guy, Court McGee.
For sure.
He's actually fighting this week.
Nice.
He's kind of struggled with retire, not retire, come back, doing the can't decide thing. So Court's back. He's fighting. He'll be in action over the weekend. He'll join us tomorrow. Chris Kamrani will join us tomorrow as he is doing his own Christopher McCandless thing over the weekend.
Right.
Neil Smith will join us. We'll start talking some hockey on the program this week. And then Andy Larson will drop by as well. So we're kind of touching all our bases midweek, going back and forth, talking some hoops, talking some football, talking some hockey, and maybe even a little soccer on a game day as well, too.
All right. It will be a game day for RSL and one day closer to the weekend and halfway through your work week on a Wednesday. So join us for that. We'll say goodnight. Special thank you, Joe Fortenbaugh, Richard Smith, Scott Mitchell, and Bill Riley for any sound you may have missed from the show. Head on over to the website, which is ESPN700sports.com. Make sure to download our mobile app and take us on the go. It is the ESPN 700 app, and that's available in the App Store or the Google Play Store. Then finally, for what we do in our space, every afternoon for 4 hours, check out the podcast page. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts, and that's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review. All the things we ask you to do. It actually helps if you have time. He's Porter. I'm Spence. Say goodnight. Enjoy your Tuesday evening. A little wild card baseball comes your way. Coming up next, catch all of it right here on ESPN 700.